Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, International Recognition Procedure. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. You have joined the presentation listening using your computer speaker system by default. If you would prefer to join over the telephone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions via Slido at www.slido.com using the event code #IRWebinar23. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. Please note that we will not be accepting questions via the GoToWebinar chat function. It is now my pleasure to introduce your first speaker, Julian Beach, Interim Executive Director of Healthcare Quality and Access Group, MHRA.
Thank you and good morning, and welcome to the webinar on international recognition and the launch of this for the 1st of January 2024, just making sure I get the right year. I'd like to thank you all for joining, and I'm looking forward to a really good interactive session. We are looking to provide an update on what we're doing for the launch of the international recognition procedure. So I am joined by a number of colleagues from the MHRA. So with me on screen, I have Shirley Hopper, Deputy Director of Innovative Medicines, Andrea Johnson, Deputy Director for Authorization Lifecycle. Also with me, I have Alison Shaw from Safety and Surveillance, Jasvinder Singh from Innovative Medicines, Ian Jackson from our GMP Inspectorate, and I'm also joined by Liz Baker, who is formerly at the MHRA, who is helping us with the launch of this procedure. So I'd like to thank all of those people for their participation, and I look forward to a good webinar. So if I can have the next slide. So what we will be intending to cover is an overview of the procedure. Some of it you will have seen before, quite a lot of it you will have seen before. The eligibility form and how to submit applications, the ECTD guidance, an update on fees, publishing key performance indicators, an update on existing guidance, and then we will have an interactive Q&A session. We will start that Q&A session with some pre-submitted questions, so thank you to those who have pre-submitted, and then we will be looking to theme questions, so the individual questions as we go through the Q&A session may not be answered because of the numbers of people on the call. But what we will be trying to do is to answer as many of the same themes questions to get as many of those answers out there for you. But as I say, if you can use the Slido function to submit any questions rather than the chat function on the web tool. So firstly, if I can hand over to Shirley Hopper to take us through the first part of this.
Thank you very much, Julian. So I'm going to provide an overview of the international recognition procedure. Next slide, please. So we published guidance at the end of August. This was the first guidance that we published, and as Andrea will be touching on later, we've now published a number of follow-up guidances. So this guidance provides a list of the reference regulators which will be acceptable for use for the IRP. So these are regulators that we have worked with before through ICH, through Access, through Orbis, or when part of the European regulatory framework. So you'll be familiar with this list. It's also possible to use Access Consortium approvals for IRP if MHRA was not included in the initial work sharing procedure, and the applicant chooses one of the trusted regulators within the Access Consortium as the reference regulator. And you'll also note that for the European Union, as well as EMA, individual member state competent authorities can be reference regulators, as well as approvals via the MRP DCP. And for this reason, the international recognition procedure will be replacing ECDRP and the MRDC reliance procedure. Next slide, please. Yes, so we are offering this procedure alongside our national licensing routes from the 1st of January 2024, and these national licensing routes are unchanged. So that would include our national route, which will be unchanged from that which commenced at the beginning of January 2021, and also the Project Orbis and the access routes that you will be familiar with. So, as I've already said, IRP replaces ECDRP and also the MRDCRP. So it's open to applicants who have received an authorization from a reference regulator for the same medicinal product. There has to have been a full standalone review by the reference regulator, so we can't do recognition on the top of a previous reliance or recognition. And the authorization by the reference regulator must be within 10 years for initial marketing authorization applications. And the MHRA will conduct a targeted assessment of the dossier based on the reference regulator assessment reports. And IRP does cover the product life cycle, and I'll be touching on this a bit later. Next slide, please. So the majority of product types are covered by IRP, including new active substances, chemicals and biologicals, also generic medicines, including hybrid applications, fixed combination products, and vaccines and biosimilars. But it does not include traditional herbal and homeopathic products or bibliographic well-established use applications. Next slide, please. Okay, so there are two different routes for initial marketing authorization applications and also line extensions. So there's recognition A, which is 60 calendar days with no clock stop, and recognition B, which is 110 calendar days, and that allows for a clock stop at day 70 if required. And the clock stop can be up to 60 days. For recognition A, if issues cannot be resolved within 60 days, the timetable may revert to recognition B. And for recognition B, if there are outstanding major objections by day 110, then the recognition B timetable may revert to the national timetable. So the purpose of having these two timetables and fees is to enable fast approval of those IRP applications which require limited assessment. And these timetables do compare favourably with our national assessment timetables, which currently run between 150 and 210 days. Suitability for recognition A or B will be determined by completion of the pre-submission eligibility form, and we've just released new guidance about this, and Andrea Johnson will provide more detail in a while. But this form needs to be completed 6 weeks before submission, and in a few cases MHRA triage may be needed to determine whether route A or B is applicable, and this will be done before submission. And applications that are unsuitable for recognition A or B can be submitted via the national route. Next slide, please. So to be eligible for recognition A, the reference regulator approval needs to be within 2 years. The manufacturing process needs to be essentially the same as that approved by the reference regulator, with evidence of compliance with GMP at submission, and none of the recognition B criteria should be met. Next slide, please. So a full description of the recognition B criteria is provided in the main guidance, but some of the key criteria are listed here. For B, the reference regulator approval should be granted within the previous 10 years. And the other criteria include if the reference regulator has granted a conditional MA or MA under exceptional circumstances, or the international equivalent of that, and or this is sought in UK or GB, then a recognition B will apply. Recognition B will also apply if, compared to the reference regulator assessment, there are additional manufacturing sites or substantial changes in the manufacturing process or the analytical methods, or different proposed container closure system, shelf life, or storage conditions. Recognition B will apply if at least one manufacturing site does not have GMP certification at the time of submission, and it also applies for certain product types, including ATMPs, orphan drugs, and over-the-counter products. And also there are some aspects of the risk management plan which should make a product recognition B, and I'll touch on this next. So next slide, please. So the risk management plan to be submitted with the application must follow the EU RMP template, and where appropriate, the GB or UK specific RMP annex, together with the approved EU RMP, can be used, and there is details of this on our guidance on pharmacovigilance procedures. Now, if the reference regulator has not assessed the RMP, which format that we require, so the EU format, or they have assessed it in a different format to the one for the UK, then recognition B will apply, because we will need to carry out a full assessment of the risk management plan. And recognition B will also apply whether our UK specific risk management activities, or where the reference regulator has mandated at least one pass. Next slide, please. So there are national pharmacovigilance requirements that will apply in the case of international recognition. So there are UK requirements for individual case safety reports and PSURs. And also IRP is not a substitute for the MAH's responsibility for submitting pharmacovigilance data and information to the MHRA, and keeping the license up to date with scientific knowledge. And where there are new data which may impact the benefit risk, particularly where the clinical management of patients might be affected, the MHRA should be informed as soon as possible. And variations which impact on patient safety will be assessed in the context of the UK clinical situation, and we may need to assess these via a national route if there are specific UK considerations. Next slide, please. So international recognition does cover the product life cycle, and the timeframes for IRP will be the existing timeframes for these type of applications. The exception to this is line extensions which are following the route A or the route B. So for life cycle applications that are not a line extension, recognition A or B does not apply. So you can apply for type 1B and type 2 variations via international recognition. You can apply for renewals, including annual renewal of CMAs and annual reassessment of MAs under exceptional circumstances. But all other types of post-market applications are national only. And it should be noted that it is the UK equivalent of the applications. So, for example, type 1B and type 2 that will apply. So, during the life cycle, it is recommended that the same reference regulator is used for the IRP applications. However, there may be occasions where you may wish to use a different reference regulator, and this is allowable if it is justified. For example, it may be a new indication which would allow earlier access for patients in the UK. And you don't need to complete the eligibility form for variations. That is only for initial MAs and line extensions. And for all variations, you complete the usual application form, and the ECTD sequence needs to be submitted. But you do need to include in the cover letter that this is a recognition procedure and who the reference regulator is. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Andrea Johnson now for the next part of the presentation.
Thank you, Shirley, and hello. Next slide, please. I'm happy to announce that the eligibility checker went live on the 20th of November, so it's now accessible from our international recognition procedure pages, and you will see a boxed area where you can easily access the form to enable you to be able to complete it. We also have provided some guidance on those pages, and I'll go through that in a little more detail towards the end of the presentation. The first thing I would like to do is say thank you very much to a few industry reps who actually did some testing for us so that we could get this beta version of the form out and accessible. We did receive some feedback from them, and we modified a couple of questions that were a little bit ambiguous, and therefore we removed them. But also the general feedback was that it was easy to use. There was some other elements that they raised, and we will look to have a view of whether we can release these later in later iterations of the version, but right now we want stability of the form, so we'll be leaving it how it is for a little bit. So as I've said, we've included guidance to complete the form and how to submit this, and it includes details of also how to submit your marketing authorization, because the eligibility checker only applies to initial applications. There are some other types of application that are not allowed via the form, but we've kept them in just so that you don't end up completing the form when you don't actually need to. You will get a warning saying that it's not an appropriate way. You don't need to submit this for national applications, for example, and for variations or any variations, but you will have to complete it for all initial applications. And that must be completed for all of the initial applications, irrespective of who the reference regulator is. So even if you're using the EMA or if you're using MRDC as the reference regulator, you must complete the eligibility form. Just a couple of points to note. The form, we had some feedback from industry reps that on occasions they couldn't actually save the PDF because the form will give you a series of questions and then it will give you the result and you have to save the PDF. So it is worth checking with your IT department before you start completing the form, just to make sure that you've got no problems with saving the outcome. Next slide, please. So I'm going to take you through how to apply and step-by-step procedure. Next point, please. So for the initial application, you will need to obtain a product license number. Next point, please. And to obtain that, you need, if you're not already registered with us, you need to register to get your 5-digit code. If you're an existing company, you should have that, and get your PL number. Next step. Then we're going to use the form to determine which recognition procedure applies. Next step, please. So 6 weeks before you intend to submit your application, use the eligibility checker to determine the route. The checker actually has inbuilt coding to tell us whether it's going to be an A, a B, a triage, and you need to save, as I've indicated, that form so that you're ready to submit. Next step, please. So deciding which way you need to submit, we actually have this in the guidance, but in actual fact, the form includes all of the information. It includes all the relevant information. So it will tell you what to do with the application form when you get it. But just to go through those points, if it indicates the recognition A or B, then submit the form with your MAA application via the MHRA submissions platform and the Human Medicines tab, and that's very important. I'll come on to that in the next slide, but you must submit via that route. So if it comes out A and B and it's not a new active substance, then you can just include it in your application and proceed to submit that application. Next, please. If it indicates that it's triage, and there are a few questions, very few questions that will actually require this, then you submit the form 6 weeks in advance to the MHRA recognition mailbox. And we will then look at it, triage it, make a decision, and we anticipate to be able to do that within 10 days of the receipt of these. And once we have done that, we will inform you via email what the outcome is. What you should then include is both the eligibility form and the outcome in your MAA submission. Next step, please. For new active substances, where the eligibility indicates it's a recognition A or B, we still want to see these 6 weeks in advance because you normally would give us early notification that you're going to submit a new active substance. So this form will give us that indication. So even if it's a recognition A or recognition B for new active substance, then please submit to the MHRA recognition mailbox. You won't receive anything other than a notification from us to indicate that we've received that, and you can submit your application with the eligibility form in 6 weeks time. And next one, please. Obviously, if it's a new active substance and it requires triage, then we will go through the normal triage process and inform you of the outcome. And so that you've got time to submit your application as well and include the outcome and the information and the checker in your ECTD submission. As I indicated, all of this information actually appears on the eligibility form when you've completed it. So it's in the guidance and it's on the eligibility form, so hopefully easy to follow. Next slide, please. As I indicated, any international recognition procedure that's for your marketing authorization application or your product lifecycle applications need to come through the MHRA submissions platform using the Human Medicines tab. There is no other submission route that is acceptable for this. When you do come onto this, and if you don't have this, we have instructions of how to register so that you can actually access this. But when you do come onto it, you will notice, for those who are more familiar with using it, that there are some new regulatory activity drop-downs and descriptions to use. So if you're submitting a marketing authorization application, you need to indicate whether this is a marketing authorization NAS and which route it is, A or B, or if it's not a NAS, which route it is, A or B. And for variations and renewals, obviously, as Shirley has indicated, there are certain types of variation, type 1Bs and type 2s, and some renewals that are applicable for international recognition. So you choose the appropriate one. There is a split in the variation type 2 to include if your type 2 includes a new indication, or if it excludes new indication. Next slide, please. So we have updated and provided some ECTD guidance. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go through every aspect of what's in the guidance, but just give you some key salient points. The guidance actually tells you the content, the format, requirements for completion of an ECTD, and it covers both initial applications and variations and renewal applications. The guidance doesn't go into great detail about the types of assessment, reports, etc. that are required to be included, but that information is included in the initial guidance that we provided about IRP. Just to give you an overview of what is required, so for initial applications, all modules for the ECTD should be in the EU format, so that's modules 1 to 5. There will be some specific UK information that needs to be included in module 1, and you must include some of the information in the cover letter or the subfolder to the cover letter. We, in addition, have asked for some data to be included in M1 additional. And all of the requirements and all of the formats by which you should do that are covered in the ECTD guidance. The ECTD module 2 to 5 should include all relevant information required for the MHRA application. And this will be a baseline of the required information as approved by the reference regulator at the time of submission to the MHRA, but also anything additional that we require for the MHRA's submission. All of these need to comply with any EU regional requirements of the ICH ECTD standard. Next slide, please. Variations, very similar. So all modules, ECTD should be in the EU format, module 1 to 5, with UK specific information in module 1, cover letter, additional areas, it's all in our guidance. Your cover letter, because you don't fill in an eligibility form, should include who the reference regulator is and that you're using the application and indicate who that this is an international recognition procedure. ECTD modules 2 to 5 should include all the relevant information required for the MHRA application and should be a consolidated sequence of the required information that was approved by the reference regulator at the submission date to the MHRA. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. We have updated the fees, so our fees page is now updated to include the required fees for international recognition procedures, so please check those out. Those fees follow the existing Reliance fee routes, and we will keep this under review during initial phases of implementation and align any modification with the agency's standard fees cycle. Next slide, please. We do intend to publish key performance indicators as we do today. Next slide, please. And it is our intention to use the existing publications we provide today. So for Route A and Route B, that will cover the medium time to determination and the number of applications that we've received, and it will also cover the time to validation. For variations, it will be as our existing publications. We will keep these under review during the initial phases of implementation, and we'll decide whether additional information needs to be provided as well. So if you have thoughts on this, please feel free to pass them on and we can consider those as we move forward. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So just to give you an update on the existing guidance that we've done. So Shirley showed you what we had for our initial recognition pages. On the same page, you will find some additional information. The supplementary information was published probably around the earlier part of November, and it was some feedback that we were receiving, questions, etc., that were coming up on a regular basis. So we updated and gave some feedback on those things. So use the two things to help you to consider what you need to do for international recognition procedures. The new elements that are there since the 20th of November are obviously the eligibility checker itself, which I showed you earlier, but we've also given guidance for the eligibility checker and submitting marketing authorizations. We've given guidance for the product life cycle, so how to apply for variations and renewals under IRP, and we've also published the ECTD guidance for IRP MAs and also for life cycle products.
Thank you very much to all of the contributors to this, and I hope that people found this useful. We will be looking to see how we can update our guidance to incorporate some of the other questions. So as I mentioned, that we will be learning as this process goes forward, so that we will then, as we can do, update guidance and issue updates as to how we will be handling procedures going forward. So if there are any other remarks from Shirley or Andrea, I'd just like to thank everybody again and draw it to a close.